Given that, according to the Pfizer non-clinical report, there was no carcinogenic tests, no genotoxicity tests, no immunotoxicity tests, no interaction studies with other medicines, no longitudinal studies, and I note that in regards to pregnancy and lactation, that studies were conducted on rats. How can Pfizer say that the vaccine was unequivocally safe without qualifying any risks around the vaccine?
Senator, I don't have that report in front of me, so I'm afraid I can't talk to that. What I can say is that the TGA is one of the world's leading regulators.
Okay. Well, you can take my word for it. I'm happy to table this document. Okay. So it clearly stated that a number of tests were not conducted. Okay, and given that those tests weren't conducted, and I accept it was a short time frame, I accept we had a short time frame, but that doesn't remove the risk that certain risks were not analysed, and you never highlighted those risks when the vaccine was rolled out.
Senator, I disagree with that statement. I think there was a very clear assessment of the benefit risk. The Therapeutic Goods Administration is a very thorough and very competent authority, perfectly able to reach a decision based on data which it reviews.
Okay. So initially, when the vaccine was rolled out, myocarditis and pericarditis wasn't a recognised side effect. Does Pfizer understand why the vaccine causes myocarditis and pericarditis? And if not, how then can it guarantee that it's not also injuring other organs? And can you explain the process why the vaccine causes myocarditis and pericarditis?
I'll take that, Dr. Hewitt.
Sure.
Based on our clinical trials and pharmacovigilance data, as well as real-world evidence following the distribution now of billions of doses of vaccine, we retain confidence, strong confidence in the safety profile of the vaccine.
Sorry, Chair, point of order. I've asked, do you understand why it causes, I know that it's a low risk, I'm asking, do you understand why it causes myocarditis? I want you to explain to me why it causes myocarditis. Do you understand why it causes myocarditis?
Pfizer is aware of very rare reports of myocarditis and pericarditis that have been temporarily associated with vaccination.
Well, that's still ongoing for some people.
Senator Reddick, Dr. Through should answer the question. Thank you, Dr. Through.
According to public health experts and regulatory authorities around the globe, the number of reports of myocarditis remains small.
I'm not referring to the number of reports. I want you to explain to me the mechanism of how the vaccine causes myocarditis. Do you or do you not understand the mechanism of why the vaccine causes myocarditis? It looks to me like you don't. And if you don't understand it, why are you saying the vaccine is safe without qualifying the risks?
So, Senator Rennick, I think Dr. Through is actually about to get to that point. Whether people agree, whether there's agreement to his evidence or not, is another question for others to make a judgment on. But if Dr. Through, if you could again go to Senator Rennick's question.
Senator, all medicines, all therapeutic products and vaccines have benefits and have side effects as well. Looking at the totality of the evidence for Pfizer's COVID-19 vaccine, regulatory authorities, health authorities, experts globally, including in Australia within the Department of Health and the TGA, have maintained that the benefit-risk ratio...
That's not the question that I asked. I asked, can you explain why the vaccine causes myocarditis? Yes or no?
Senator, the benefit-risk profile...
Yes or no? So you clearly don't understand the pathway, do you? Because you can't explain it. I'm not referring to the cost-benefit analysis here. I'm referring to, do you understand the biochemical pathway as to why the vaccine causes damage to the heart?
Senator, I'm happy to take your question on notice and come back to the committee with whatever information we can provide. I might just clarify, I was not referring to a cost-benefit analysis in my previous response. I was referring to the benefit-risk ratio, and health authorities around the globe continue to recommend the benefits.
This isn't the question that I'm asking. Anyway, so what percentage of profits does Moderna plough back into helping people who are injured by the vaccine?
Thank you. I was going to say we're aware that it's a that there is sort of an indemnity for COVID-19 suppliers, but indemnities are policy matter for government to decide. I can't comment.
So Moderna doesn't put any of its profits back into helping the victims of injuries from the Moderna vaccine, is that correct?
So Moderna is a company that's focused on manufacturing vaccines. The matter of indemnity for vaccine suppliers is a matter for government.
So you're not prepared to underwrite the risk of your own vaccine. You're not prepared to actually put money where your mouth is when it comes to the safety of your vaccine. Is that correct?
So just before you answer this question, Senator Rennick, I'll have to go to Senator Antic after this answer is given.
That's just the last question there.
Back to you.
Just yes or no, you're not prepared to underwrite the safety of your own vaccine?
We take safety of our vaccines very seriously. We have a very good pharmacovigilance process in place, in fact, a comprehensive one. However, I would only reiterate that indemnities are a matter for policymakers.
But what about a moral, social conscience of putting some of your profits back into helping victims of the vaccine? Zero? Is it $0?
I might just before you, again, Dr. Leong, just before you answer that, I appreciate.
Well, it's just that she's not answering,
No,
Chair.
I respect you asking the questions. I just want to make sure we can get to Senator Antic and keep to our timetable. But
I'll just take that as a zero. Thank you. Acting Deputy President, I too support this motion and believe that we need a Royal Commission into COVID. I'd also like a Senate inquiry into COVID as well, but anyway, I'll take whatever I can get at this stage, because there are a number of issues that need to be addressed in this, and first of all is the origins of COVID itself. We had Anthony Fauci come out the day before Trump's inauguration and said that there would be an outbreak, a surprise outbreak throughout Trump's term. This same person then colluded with none other than some Australians, one Ed Holmes from Sydney University, with the view to actually cover up the origins of the coronavirus. So we need to look at that as well, whether or not coronavirus was deliberately made. Was there a deliberate cover-up? We then need to look at the diagnostic tool, the PCR testing. We need to determine which part of the COVID sequence was actually used to indicate a positive return. There's 29,000 proteins in the coronavirus, 29 proteins, 29,000 nucleotides. We need to know the length of the nucleotides and that sequence that was used in the PCR test to determine whether or not COVID was positive. We also need to look at why the cycle threshold was set to 40, not 28. We also then need to look at why the World Health Organisation told national health authorities to code everything that came back with a positive, every death that came back with a positive COVID test to actually COVID and not some other form of disease. So, for example, people could have had comorbidities and were dying from other comorbidities, but the World Health Organisation said that you have to actually put that to COVID, which obviously would have bumped up the number of COVID deaths. We also need to look at the role of the media, and in particular the way they've ramped up the fear-mongering in regards to COVID. We need to look at the censorship that was involved with COVID. Anyone that questioned the narrative of COVID was censored. That's not the way science is conducted. Science should always be open to scrutiny, so we need to look at the censorship there. We need to look at the role the state premiers played with their daily press conferences. Who can remember the Queensland Premier with her classic statement, "There's COVID in the sewerage, be scared everybody." That sort of insanity needs to stop and cannot be allowed to ever happen again. We need to consider why we bought 300 million vaccines, 12 doses for every man, woman and child in this country, when at the same time we were told that 2 doses were enough. We dropped over $8 billion on these vaccines. We could have bought 75 million, spent $2 billion and saved $6 billion for frontline services, including maternity wards in my hometown of Chinchilla. We also need to look at why 10 million people caught COVID after the borders were opened up. We were told the public assessment report said COVID was approved, the vaccine was approved to stop infection, yet 10 million people caught COVID in the year after opening up. It did not work, and we need to ask ourselves why the pharmaceutical companies got away with it.
Time has expired. Thank you, Senators. This being an urgency motion, it will come to a vote. So I put the question. Those in support of the UAP urgency motion say aye. Aye. To the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. Division required? Ring the bells for 4 minutes.
Order. There being 28 ayes and 29 noes, the matter is resolved in the negative.
Pilots are reporting UAP at altitudes that appear above them.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Graves, you reported UAP encounters during training flights, I think, and have since come forward to warn the Pentagon that these encounters may be putting pilots at risk.
And many of them also had their own eye sightings as well of these objects. Now, that was our personal first.
I spent 11 and a half hours with both Intel committees. So.
Okay. Has there been an active U.S. government disinformation campaign to deny the existence of unidentified aerial phenomena? And if so, why?
Thank you. Ms. Ocasio-Cortez.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to our witnesses for coming here today. I do concur with the ranking member as well as several other members here on this committee that this is a committee for whistleblowers and for the protection of whistleblowers as well. So we understand what you're putting on the table here and what you're putting on the line here, and we thank you for that. Mr. Grush, you sat on the Unidentified Anomalous Phenomenon Task Force created in the 2020 NDAA, correct?
Yes.
There have been some things that have been mentioned here during this hearing that I wanted to pick up on. Mr. Graves, you mentioned specifically during the answers to one of your questions, you named Boeing contractors being engaged in an incident regarding this red cube about a football field wide. I was wondering if you could speak a little bit about the interaction, or Mr. Grush, either of you, the interactions between defense contractor companies and any UAP-related programs or activities.
Same answer, potentially.
Yeah, I'd say definitely, potentially. Mr. Graves and Fravor, in the event that your encounters had become hostile, would you have had the capability to defend yourself, your crew, your aircraft?
Absolutely not.
Sir?
No.
Authentic video, amateur video, and right about now you're going to see a very fast acceleration. And that's what we've been talking about, folks. And the important part is that this introduces a concept which I'd like to share with the panel, and that is inertia is involved. And as we get to the next slide, hopefully we can see that, the inertial mass and gravitational mass are totally different.
Received. I have one little question I'd like to get cleared up. I understand that a bit ago there was a petition being circulated in one of our communities suggesting that the city waterworks should stop putting dihydroxide into the water system because if in the future it was determined to be hazardous to health, it could never be removed. Dihydroxide, of course, is water. And it's true that if you put it in there, it can never be removed.
You've referred to people with a capacity for pregnancy. Would that be women?
Many women, cis women, have the capacity for pregnancy. Many cis women do not have the capacity for pregnancy. There are also trans men who are capable of pregnancy, as well as non-binary people who are capable of pregnancy.
So this isn't really a women's rights issue.
We can recognize that this impacts women while also recognizing that it impacts other groups. Those things are not mutually exclusive, Senator Hawley.
Oh, so your view is that the core of this right then is about what?
So I want to recognize that your line of questioning is transphobic, and it opens up trans people to violence by not recognizing that.
Wow, you're saying that I'm opening up people to violence by asking whether or not women are the folks who can have pregnancies?
So I want to note that 1 out of 5 transgender persons have attempted suicide. So I think it's important
because of my line of questioning?
Because,
so we can't talk about it?
Because denying that trans people exist and pretending not to know that they exist
I'm
is
denying that
dangerous.
trans people exist by asking you if you're talking about women having pregnancies?
Do you believe that men can get pregnant?
No, I don't think women can get
So you are
pregnant.
denying that trans people exist?
And that leads to violence? Is this how you run your classroom? Are students allowed to question you?
Absolutely.
Or are they also treated like this, where
No,
they're told
allowed
that
to
they're
question.
opening up people to violence?
We have a good
by
time in my
questioning?
class. You should join.
Oh, I bet.
You might learn a lot.
Wow, I would learn a lot. I've learned a lot
I
just in
know.
this exchange.
Absolutely.
Extraordinary.
Cheers. Thanks, guys. I note earlier this year that US President Biden has signed into law a measure requiring the administration to declassify intelligence related to potential links between China's Wuhan Institute of Virology and COVID-19 pandemic amid continued questions about the virus origins. I've asked you before whether or not ASIO is interested in looking at the origins of the virus, given the potential risk brought about by the fact we have a number of universities conducting gain-of-function research here in Australia. Is that something, given that the US are now going to look at, that yourself or Murray, Senator Minister Watt, you can answer this, look at here?
ASIO is not looking at the origins of COVID from an intelligence point of view, because we're looking at current threats to security, and so we're not looking at that.
Okay, so I'm glad you said that. So you're looking at current threats. If we've got universities conducting gain-of-function research, and I'll note Sydney University, for example, a bloke by the name of Edward Holmes, he was one of the first people contacted by Anthony Fauci to look into the origins of the virus. He's had FOIs put on requesting his emails that Sydney University won't release. I have a concern that there isn't enough oversight of this particular threat, given that we want what we went through with the whole COVID pandemic over the 2 years, be it lockdowns, lockouts, whatever. I'm flabbergasted at the fact that the government isn't prepared to assess this risk here in Australia.
Sorry, the question is...
Well, the question is, why don't you consider it a threat, given that there is a genuine risk of gain of function? And it's not necessarily because people are planning to do anything, but there is a risk. So from a quality assurance point of view, I would have thought that there'd be controls around, viruses getting out as a result of gain of function.
No, certainly I understand the question. So we look at threats to security.
My question is, previously the Health Department has said that the PCR test cannot distinguish between live and dead viruses. How many positive PCR tests were false positives?
I don't know whether Professor Kelly can attempt to answer that. That answer is correct. The PCR test is testing, it doesn't distinguish between live and dead virus. I suspect the false positivity rate for PCR tests is very low, but Professor Kelly, have you got any insight into that?
Nothing else to add, really, Brendan. I don't think that's an answer that we could possibly give even on notice.
Yeah, this is the diagnostic tool that has been used to shut down a country for almost 2 years, that is used to justify spending hundreds of billions of dollars, and you can't tell me how accurate it is?
Well, I think there were some significant studies done earlier in the pandemic that correlated PCR tests against viral culture, and that obviously picked when there was a live virus there. But I think we can go back. The Doherty Institute did a lot of work on this. We can take on notice and provide you evidence of the specificity and sensitivity of the PCR test. And our advice, certainly in the early stages of the pandemic, is that it was highly specific and highly sensitive. But we'll provide on notice.
So I'll follow up with another question then. Can you also provide, if you can't tell me, and I would have thought you could, what actual genomic sequence you tested for, which part of the 29 proteins, 1,000 nucleotides each protein, which part of the coronavirus genomic sequence did you use to indicate that someone was positive to COVID, and whether or not that genomic sequence also makes up other coronaviruses?
We can provide on notice the specific primers and the part of the virus that it's used for. We do not believe that there was cross-reactivity with other coronaviruses, but we can provide on notice we've got experts in the Doherty who could be very happy to provide that information.
Okay, and could you also provide the product assessment report for the diagnostic tools used for the PCR tests and the RAT tests? I can't seem to find them on the TGA website, but I would have thought that should be available so that we can scrutinise the actual diagnostic tool used to determine the positivity. Thanks.
Profit accrues from fast-track TGA approvals that save pharmaceutical companies billions of dollars and caused a new cost in human suffering, death and injury. Nothing could illustrate this point more than the heartbreaking testimony last week of Deborah Hamilton at the Senate inquiry into Senator Hanson's bill to ban COVID injection mandates. Deborah lost her daughter immediately after her COVID injections, which her employer mandated to keep her job. Her employer and their parent company had Vanguard Investment Fund as a leading shareholder in Financier. Vanguard is the leading corporate shareholder in Pfizer. Vanguard mandated vaccines they make a profit from. When predatory billionaires and their trillion-dollar investment funds murder a beautiful 22-year-old vibrant Australian in an unquenchable thirst for profit, it shows corporate ownership and influence has gone too far. For media, the payoff was advertising accepted in return for government's aggressive propaganda-level promotion of the COVID narrative. Messaging broadcast to citizens who were captive in their own homes. Academics took their research grants and delivered the outcome they were asked to deliver. So much science in the COVID period was delivered with a high degree of confidence, and yet in recent months much of the science underpinning our COVID response has been proven to be dodgy, deceitful and dangerous, inhumanly so. Bureaucrats saw the opportunity to spread their power in a way previously never allowed. Bureaucrats who were there to oversee drug companies failed in their duty so badly that malfeasance must be a term of reference for a Royal Commission. We know the TGA did not check the Pfizer clinical trial data. The TGA took Pfizer's word for the trial results, and Pfizer lied repeatedly. When leading international virologists analysed the trial data in a peer-reviewed and published paper, they found the Pfizer vaccine caused 14% more harm than it saved and should never have been approved. Finally, our politicians. Australians elected to have nothing but the best interests of their constituents at heart, engaged in policy decisions that did more damage to Australians than any foreign enemy has ever achieved. To emphasise why our COVID response cannot be allowed to go without scrutiny, let me review the COVID developments that have come to light in just the last month. 1. Ivermectin won the Nobel Prize for Medicine in 2015.
You said that you're a trans woman.
A trans female, yes, sir.
Do you have a penis? Are you telling us that you're unfamiliar with the large body of medical evidence of the harm that has come upon people that have gone through these processes?
I'm familiar with a large body of evidence that shows that providing good affirming care saves lives.
Are you saying that you're unaware of the large body of medical evidence of the harm that has come upon these people in these processes that have been gone through? Are you unaware of that body of evidence?
I will repeat what I just said.
Are you unaware of that body of evidence?
I will repeat what I just said.
You said that you're a trans woman.
A trans female, yes, sir.
Do you have a penis?
That's horrible.
You're the one that brought that into the discussion.
I never said anything about genitalia.
Oh, it has everything to do with genitalia.
I don't know what my rights are right now.
Audience, if you want to stay in here.
I don't know what my rights are, but that question was highly inappropriate.
You do not have to answer any question. If you're through, we'll dismiss you.
Well, I'm not through with questions, but I'm not going to answer that question. That's highly inappropriate.
Again, you can say that, and that's your right. So.
Okay. I'm a healthcare professional, a doctor. Please treat me as such. Next question, please.